It wasn't always easy, even for the great ones. Today I'm talking to Joel Salatin about his struggles early on starting his farm business and how his experience can help you in your farm business. Stay tuned for an epic episode with Joel coming up. Welcome to Grass-Fed Life. I'm your host, Diego. This is a show all about pasture-based profits. Each week, I'll be talking to farmers, new and more experienced, about different ways that they're raising livestock on pasture or in the woods. The whole goal of this show and everything that we do at Grass-Fed Life is to provide you with resources so you can be more successful with your farm business. We have the blog, we have the podcast, and we have the Farm Business Essentials online course, which will be going live shortly. For more information on everything that we do, visit our new website at grassfedlife.co. Today I'm talking to one of the legends of farming on pasture. It's Joel Salatin. And in this episode, we're going to cover a lot, specifically around Joel's start into farming. Because for Joel, it wasn't always easy. I think a lot of people look at Joel and what he's doing today at Polyfaces and assume that, well, it's easy because he's Joel Salatin. And today you'll hear what it was like before he was Joel Salatin, as in the celebrity farmer. You'll hear what it was like when he was just Joel Salatin starting out. He faced a lot of the trials and tribulations that many of you looking to get into farming today are facing. Dealing with doubters, dealing with self-doubt, trying to make finances work. It wasn't always easy, but Joel put in the work, he put in the time, and eventually it clicked and the snowball started rolling. And while this episode provides a great resource for those of you looking to get into farming, be sure to also check out Joel's book, Your Successful Farm Business, for a lot more knowledge from Joel. With that, let's get into it with the great Joel Salatin. Let's go back to that fall day, 1982, late in September. You're working at a newspaper office and you're making the leap into farming full time. What was going through your head at the time?
Well, what was going through my head was we've got enough money to go for 1 year, and I didn't expect for a minute to be able to actually make it. I thought that we would run through our nest egg in a year, and I would end up, going back to some sort of outside employment. That was my full expectation. But, man, was I excited because I knew that for at least this period of time, I'd be able to put 110% of my focus on the farm. And that was very, very exciting. Of course, you got to realize that every single person at work, friends, not a single person except, probably mom and dad thought that I was making a good decision. Nobody else thought it was a good decision. So, there was a lot of just, stubbornness and grit in that move.
Why didn't you think you'd make it, out of curiosity?
Well, I mean, we weren't making, the farm was not a going concern at the time. I mean, it was a weekend thing. It was a part-time thing, but it was not really we were not making a living on it by any means. And I didn't see how we would be able to make a living on it, frankly. Unless we were able to make some pretty substantial progress real quick. And so, if you looked at the income and the outgo, there was no way that we were going to be able to do what we were doing and stay in long term full time. Something was going to have to change. Either we were going to, and what happened was two things changed. One, our income went up, but because we were here all the time, so we could do a lot more things. and take care of things. But number two, our expenses went way down. I think that's one of the most, that was the biggest surprise to us, that we did not anticipate how cheaply we could live.
Were you living pretty frugally prior to that, and then you cut even more?
Oh yeah, we were, driving a $50 car. A neighbor had this car, and he let me bought it for $50. It was 20-some years old, but that was good enough. And we were living in the attic of the big house. I mean, our sights were set on being here, but the profitability. I mean, when you do this, your salary, you live on the profits. I mean, you've got your farm expenses, you got your taxes, whatever, diesel fuel, machinery, depreciation. You got all these regular expenses. And then, of course, you sell stuff, and the difference is what you live on. And it just was not enough to live on, at the time we made that leap. And so, over the course of the year, we did in fact run through our nest egg, in the year, but in that year, we were able to increase, income. I mean, I cut firewood, I helped a guy plant trees, I picked up some little odd things, and we were able to cut expenses so much. I mean, we went from filling the car with gas, whatever, once a week to filling it once a month. Those are major, major expenses, or major, savings. I didn't have to wear good clothes, so suddenly, you don't have dry cleaning, you don't have, you don't have to buy any clothes. Not that we ran a nudist colony, but, we just, there was, when people talk about, well, you need $1,000 a year for clothes. I mean, I still don't spend $1,000 a year on clothes. I mean, I don't doubt if we spend, $500 a year on clothes. And we buy at the thrift store. The shirt I'm wearing right now is a used uniform shirt from the cleaners down there, and it has the name Norman. I'm Norman today. And where do I work at? I work at Wampler Foods. Yeah, it's a big vertical factory chicken operation. I'm Norman. This shirt costs 50 cents. And,
well, I'll match you with my $2 T-shirt I have on. So
yeah, there you go. So the beauty of being here was that we were here for the timeliness of things. In farming, a lot of stuff is all about timing, and if something that can require 15 minutes at the right time, if let go, can suddenly be a 5-hour job, a week later, like weeds in the green beans or something like that. And so by being here, we were able to be timely on everything, whether it was weeds, planting, a problem birth of a calf, gathering eggs on time, not gathering at night, under a headlamp, but getting them when they're supposed to be gotten, so that they don't get broken and soiled. I mean, just all these, it seemed like a million things that suddenly tightened up all these little leaks and all these little, whatever, crises and untimely things. And the combination of that really, really changed the profitability, because suddenly the leaks were gone, the slippage, we call it slippage, the slippage was gone, and that really made a difference. The bottom line is, not only did our income come up a little bit because we were here, we could do more stuff and sell more stuff, but what we thought we needed to live, $10,000, we actually only needed about $4,000 to live on. And that, that was a major change, because every dollar you don't have to earn is worth about $1.40, because you don't have to pay taxes on it. So if you can do for yourself, grow your own food, grow your own fuel. I mean, we had a wood stove, we cut our own firewood. So, if you can cut your expenses way down, then you don't have to earn very much money for the cash amount. And all those dollars that you save, you don't have to earn and pay taxes on. So, the equivalent, so even though we earned only, $4,000 or $5,000, it was equivalent to earning, 12, because we didn't have to drive to work, we didn't have to buy clothes, we didn't have to buy food, we didn't have to pay rent, we didn't have to pay heat and air conditioning, and electric was $20 a month. And if we didn't grow it, we didn't eat it. And so we were able to live way better than our cash income indicated.
Knowing that you were going to make this leap, going from a newspaper to a farm that was a weekend farm, it wasn't a functioning entity at that point in terms of a business, did you have a plan for that first year for this is the business we're going to start and this is how much I project it's going to make? Or did you just say, I'm going to go on the farm and we'll wing it?
It was more of a wing it. I mean, now we had some plans. We knew how many calves we could sell. We had some ideas, but no, we didn't really make a business. We didn't make a balance sheet. We didn't make a business plan. We knew that we could make it for 1 year. Remember, this is all predicated. I mean, I had an email today from a distraught couple that's trying to make this leap, and their marriage is, they're losing their marriage over the stress of trying to launch this, and looked to me for advice, and I said, look, just forget the farm for 2 years. Just forget it for 2 years. Get up a nest egg. Work hard, work 2 jobs if you need to, but just get out of debt, build up a nest egg, and then in 2 years, when you've got $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 in the bank, then just push your farm restart button, and you'll be amazed what being able to put full attention on a farm and being able to have that little bit of safety valve behind you. You will make better decisions, and you'll be able to be there for all the timeliness as I discussed earlier. And so all we knew was that we had enough that we could make the leap for 1 year. And I always tell people that are wanting to do this, I say, get a nest egg for 1 year. I run into way too many people that make the leap too early. They're undercapitalized, and at the end of the year, they're yelling at their spouses. The kids are unhappy. They're poor as paupers, and they're moving boards down at the sawmill. There's nothing wrong with moving boards down at the sawmill. It's just that it's pretty menial, work if you're trying to do something, get ahead, and as a result, the whole thing begins to fall apart. So take that extra year, take that extra 2 years if you need to, get out of debt, practice living, on a third of your paycheck, and see how you get along, and let that savings account build up, and then make the leap, and it'll change things a lot.
For people starting who are undercapitalized, where do you think that undercapitalization hurts the most? Where is that biting people?
I think 2 areas. Yeah, it's a good question. I think first of all, it bites people when you realize I've got to have this tool or I've got to have this machine in order to be efficient doing this, whether it's whatever it is, a front end loader on a tractor or just name your thing. And you can't get it. And you're just, every day you're frustrated knowing if I just had this tool or this machine, I would be able to, double my return to labor, because I'd be so much more efficient. That's the first place. The second place is in the family, and this is, spouse and kids, just being under that financial pressure all the time to every decision is a, can we afford a pair of shoes? Can we whatever, go to the, youth group, meeting at church? Can we afford a costume for a play? I mean, just any of the kind of things that you're just, can we eat out? Even, once every 2 months. But when every single expenditure just becomes a knockdown, drag out, it really does get old. And so those two things, I think, the inability to become efficient with the right machine because you can't afford it, and the inability to splurge, to be able to spend some money on yourself once in a while, and I mean on yourself, on your family, once in a while. Trust me, I'm frugal on this, but once in a while, you got to have a date night. You got to do something special. If you don't, it gets pretty long.
What was one of the keys for you and Teresa early on to keep your relationship strong? You alluded to this couple, their marriage is going down the toilet. I see this all the time for people starting a business. I faced some of these stresses when I started a business. How did you guys get on the same page so that experience that you were on, the roller coaster of it all, was a mutual ride versus one person's on one track, the other person's on the other track, and there was a lot of disconnects?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing was I can always tell the guys this, look, guys, marry up, marry a thoroughbred, okay? And so Teresa was she was on the same page. She came from a very, very, tight, fisted family. Her family was frugal as well, a farm family as well. So she knew what farming was. Now, they didn't farm like we did, but they farmed nonetheless. So she knew the hours, the workload. So, in my book, You Can Farm, I mentioned that the single big reason for farms failing is lack of shared, of same pageness, common vision between the partners. And so I was very, very blessed to, obviously we were blessed that we came from similar backgrounds. We came from similar religious backgrounds, similar lifestyle backgrounds, similar vocational backgrounds. Her dad was a school teacher. My mom was a school teacher. And so there was a lot of similarity there. I mean, we were high school sweethearts. We were in band together, we were in 4-H together. So we knew each other very, very well before we came into the marriage. And we talked about dreams and vision, and if she'd have come around saying, well, I want a Taj Mahal on a hill with a horse and blah blah blah, that would have been pretty red flags to me. But I mean, she got as excited about living in an underground house. Well, we don't, but the fact that she thought that when I brought her the idea of an underground house, this is in the in the 70s, she went for it, and understood it to me. Oh yeah, it would be cool. There wouldn't be any wind. We have solar on the southern side. She just totally bought into it, and so we were compatible of theme, life goal, dream, vision, and demeanor, and so it wasn't like like one of us was wanting to spend money and one of us wanted to save money. We were both. she's actually more frugal than I joke with people. I say, what was the reason for our success? I married a wife more frugal than I. And, that's a wonderful attribute. So we were on that same page. And then we talked about, what do we want for the kids? We agreed on homeschooling. We just agreed on a lot of things. And so there wasn't this tug of war, this, pushing and pulling for lifestyle. Neither of us was ever in a country club. We didn't have expensive tastes. We didn't even go to movies. We didn't have expensive tastes. We didn't have expensive tastes in automobiles, clothes. She made all of her own clothes. She made my clothes. So there was a lot of this shared artisanship, craftsmanship, DIY, do it yourself, self-reliance kind of thing. And it was just a very close alignment.
What have you seen with some of the interns going through your program? I mean, I think you've had couples in the past. John McCauley, I think his wife was there interning when he was there, if I remember from talking to him. But you've also had, single people that are maybe in a relationship where one of the couple is there. Do you notice these struggles sometimes where one person's there, one person's not, of those couples getting on the same page? Do you hear those stories? Do you have any advice for people who are out there where it's one person that's all in on this? The other person's like, yeah, they're going to go along and support them because they love them, but they didn't come from that background. It might not be their thing. Can that still work?
Oh boy. This is going to sound hard, but I think that this, when I say this, I mean the farming vocation, if you will. I think that it demands so much of us that if both parties aren't equally passionate and gung-ho about it, you better wait a little bit. You better just stop, back up, and think that through. And remember, here's the thing to remember. There are a lot of things that you can do part-time. You can grow a large garden. You can have a solarium. You can do fruit trees. You can do bees. You can do a lot of things, on an acre, on a little homestead, on good grief, a suburban lot. I mean, you can do a lot there, and not make it full time. So you can get your farm kicks. There's, a person, think about it. If you're working out of the house for, 8 hours a day, let's say you're gone 10 because you've got an hour commute, an hour back. All right. So you're gone 10 hours a day. That leaves you 14 hours. You need, 8 hours to sleep. Now you're down to 6. Okay. What I see typically is I see people, yearning for greener pastures on the other side of the fence, saying, man, if I just could do this, farm full time, blah, blah, blah. And I ask them, what are you doing now? Well, not much. And I'm saying, whoa, wait a minute. You've got an acre, you've got 2 acres. You could cover that with produce, chickens, rabbits, a milk cow, grow some grains, some fruit trees, plum trees, strawberries. You could do patio gardening. There's a ton of things you can do in your 20 hours a week. The average American male between 25 and 35 right now today, the average American male between 25 and 35 spends 20 hours a week playing video games. Think of what you could do part-time on your little, backyard, glorified backyard maybe, but think of what you could do part-time in 20 hours a week. Most people have 20 hours a week. And so what happens is instead of having the discipline and the character, the savvy to fully leverage the time that we have, we're watching football games. We're, playing here, going to this outfit, going to the country club, going to whatever, this, that, or the other. And we're sitting here in our mind thinking, boy, if I could just farm full time, that would be really cool. Well, if that is your dream, then if your first waking thought in the morning is not getting out and doing something, you're not ready for farm. There's nothing about being on the farm full time that's going to change, that's going to fix your discipline problems, your passion problems, and your character problems. So, it sounds hard, but a lot of times this tension, as you move into this, is because there was not a fully leveraged operation going on before the leap was made. And what I see is, generally, what I see in my experience is usually when the discipline, the character, and the passion are in place at that 20-hour-a-week level, then either the party that wants to farm says, man, this is plenty for me. I'm getting all the farm the emotional fix I need. This is great. I'm happy. Or the reluctant spouse gets so excited about it that the reluctant spouse buys in full bore.
For discipline, as part of that trio, discipline, character, and passion, where are people missing on the discipline side? I'm sure you see this with people that come tour the farm, they come to workshops, they apply for internships. What's missing there?
Yeah, well, you could call this time management, but I just called it discipline simply because, if you really want to do this, you need to do it. And look, none of us is perfectly disciplined, but I remember my dad being frustrated because he was never a full-time farmer, worked off the farm, and he would be frustrated at, where does my time go? Where's my time go? And I remember him a couple of times he'd get frustrated, and he made this is before computers, so this is in the 60s, and he would make a sheet and just write down in 5-minute increments a whole day, and for a week he would plug in everything that he did, for all during the day to try to get a time budget, where to audit, basically a time audit. He was an accountant. And so he was, into figures, and so he basically did a self-time audit. Where's my time going? And I remember like yesterday, I was, maybe 12 or 13, when he came to the supper table and made this grand announcement. He's going to make this life change because he just determined that he was spending 45 minutes a day reading the newspaper. He said, I don't need to read the newspaper 45 minutes a day. He said, if I chop that to 15 minutes a day, half an hour a day, I'd have another 3 hours a week. That's half a day a week that I would have if I didn't read the newspaper 45 minutes a day. So he made this big commitment and vow and whatever. Now, it lasted about 4 months because he's a news junkie. I'm a news junkie, okay? But the point is he went through the exercise to determine where the leak was. Where is the leakage? And, another thing that was wonderful, Teresa and I, how we got going. I grew up in our family, we never had a TV. Her family had one. We got married, we discussed it, and we decided, you know what? We're going to start without it. We're not going to have it. And to this day, we still don't have a TV. People, they're always talking about movies this, movies that. I don't know anything about movies. But you know what? I know a lot about other things. And so, it's a matter of disciplining of what you put your time and attention on. One of the business axioms is a lot of times your business is much better defined by what you say no to than what you say yes to. And so just remember your time is like this as well. We've all got 24 hours a day. And you'd be amazed at how much time can be frittered away, whether, and I'm not opposed to newspaper. I love newspapers, okay? I'm a news junkie. But frittered away, whether watching TV, watching movies, Netflix, just entertainment, recreation, and I'm not saying it's evil, but I am saying you can very, very quickly fritter away 20, 25 hours a week that, if your heart is really in something, could have been better spent thematically on that. And there's nothing about moving from part-time to full-time farming that's going to change that element of a person's life.
Yeah, I love that approach, and I think that's makes a lot of difference, and it doesn't cost you anything to sit back and think about this, do this. It's an easy fix. It just takes some time, and the scary thought is most people won't take that time to do that. And if you do, I think it gives you a huge advantage over other people who aren't doing it.
Yes, I mean, another great example of that is just, domestic culinary arts. I can assure you one of the reasons for our success is because, Teresa's a kitchen wizard, and, she cans and cooks from scratch, and we use a slow cooker, and we don't mind eating green beans for evening meals. If that's what the garden produced this year, we eat green beans, and there's a lot of ways you can have green beans. Anyway, the thing is, if you have this, idea, this dream out here, I want to be a farmer, and you're not living like one in the city, there's nothing about moving to the farm that's suddenly gonna kick in a canning gene or a dehydrating gene or a domestic culinary arts gene.
Right.
You're not going to suddenly discover that simply because you've moved your location. And so if you are in the city and you have a great big garden and you're eating out of your garden and you're eating your own produce and you're and this really jazzes you up and you tell your friends, no, I'm not going to play bridge on Tuesday night. That's when we've got this big crop of tomatoes coming in, and we're all going to make salsa. If that is your lifestyle, you might make it on the farm. But if that is not your lifestyle, there's nothing about moving to the farm that's going to suddenly anoint you with a farmer's persona in your life and have you suddenly emerge a farming lifestyle kind of person.
I think for a lot of people that get jazzed about this, they have that gene, and maybe their partner has that gene. The key then becomes to making this work, making that transition like you did from one field into farming. You mentioned that your dad, he was always wanted to be this full-time farmer, couldn't make it work. When he bought that farm in Virginia, I think in the early 60s, you talked about this in your book, Your Successful Farm Business. He bought it, he gave it a go for a year, and he realized that the farm couldn't produce an income and pay the mortgage at the same time. Knowing what you know today, what could he have done differently to make that farm business successful in the 60s if you of today could talk to him then?
Yeah, well, this isn't a guarantee, but for sure, a lot of it is in simply what we know now. We simply have infrastructure now that we didn't have back then. The biggest being electric fence. Electric fence was in its very, very infancy back then. So he read about managed grazing and things like this, but it was the fencing was on again, off again. It was sporadic, so it was hard to really control things. It was frustrating, simply because the infrastructure didn't work. I mean, imagine if every time you went out and went somewhere in your car, if 1 out of 3 trips there was a breakdown and you couldn't get there, you would not drive your car very much. you'd just be frustrated. And so I think he was absolutely on the right path, but the infrastructure to be able to manage as precisely as with the precision that we do today with this computer microchip. I still have our original Sears and Roebuck solid state energizer hanging up in the shop. I need to put it in a museum. It says on it, no moving parts. I mean, this was in and that did not come out until the late 60s. So we'd already been here for 8 years before those kind of energizers even came out. And of course, the ones we have today spin circles around those. The bandsaw mill. There was no such thing as a bandsaw mill in 1960. So lumber was extremely expensive, hard come by, and especially small lumber, because the kerf on these big circular sawmills, it took 3/8 of an inch of wood per cut. Well, 3/8 of an inch, that meant every 3 cuts, you took an inch of wood away. Well, nobody could afford to make lath stuff, real light, like 1x1s, 1x2s, because all you did was have a big pile of sawdust. And chainsaws, my son and daughter-in-law got me a chainsaw history book for Christmas a couple of years ago, and it never struck me before that the chainsaw, as we know it, has only come into its existence in my lifetime, and I'm not that old. But really, pre-1960, the functional chainsaw, as we know it, was not available. And so when you add the chainsaw, which made lumber, trees suddenly, cheapen down lumber to where now we could make portable infrastructure today with a bandsaw mill that takes only a 1/10 of an inch kerf, so we can mill 1x1, 1/2 inch by 1 inch lath and make portable infrastructure out of Tinker Toys. Suddenly, the combination, nursery shade cloth, woven spun poly, that wasn't available in the early 1960s to be able to make portable shade structures for the animals that we were moving around. Plastic pipe was extremely expensive. I mean, this rolled polyethylene pipe. I'm not talking about PVC, but just plastic pipe as we have today in these gigantic rolls that we roll out by the mile. Now we have 8 miles of this pipe on our farm. That was a novelty. That was a novelty then. I mean, we were just coming off of iron pipe. You couldn't afford to lay 8 miles of iron pipe around your farm, buried. Today, for 75 cents a foot, we can get 600-foot rolls of 1.25 inch, 1.5 inch pipe, and just with a subsoiler zip out through the farm. I mean, the front end loader, the chipper, wood chippers, cheap, very efficient wood chippers that were not expensive. So I can go on and on, but the point is that all of this symbiotic infrastructure for carbon development, portable control, portable water, composting ability, all of that infrastructure and ability simply wasn't there in 1960. And so we couldn't leverage the vision because we didn't have the infrastructure to be able to take us where the vision took us. By 1970, that 10-year period, a lot of things changed. The Energizer changed. By the late 70s, we had bandsaw mills. By 1978, 9, I was in high school. We bought our first chipper, a used wood chipper, so we could do large-scale composting. That 10 years, there was a tremendous amount of infrastructure and developmental change in what was in our knowledge and our infrastructure during that time.
There's a lot that we can take for granted that we have now that we didn't have then, that infrastructure and a lot of the knowledge, your pastured poultry profits, salad bar beef, everything you've brought to the table. If we fast forward ahead of where you just left off there, when you're starting in 1982, the Joel farming then was planting trees, building a structure, selling firewood. Very different than the polyface farm of today in terms of farm-based enterprises. How did you start to evolve, I'll call it the odd jobs, the firewood, into the operations that are on the farm today? Where did the animals start to come in, and how did you approach it then as, I don't want to say a newbie, but not having 30 years of experience?
Yeah, well, we always, from day one, we had livestock. We had cows day one, and again, the electric fence was not functioning very well, but we moved them every, couple of weeks or so, which was still, way more than most people. And even when I was, I don't know, by the early 70s, when I was just 12 or 13, Dad realized that we had to direct market. And so we began direct marketing and opened a stand at the local curb market. It was the precursor of today's farmers market. It was established back in the Depression to give farmers a place, a platform to sell their stuff in town. And by the time I came on, when I was like 13 or so, it was down to 2 elderly matrons, and then I came on as a 13-year-old. And I'm confident that I breathed several years of life into that, that nostalgic curb market, as this kid, with these 2 grandmothers down there. And we always milked a couple of cows, so we always, made yogurt and butter and buttermilk and cottage cheese. And so that was in those days. We had an agreement that if I joined 4-H, then that would show that I was, interested in the latest, greatest scientific knowledge out of the land-grant university system. And so there was a memorandum of understanding between the food inspection service that said, that at the curb market where we farmers would go with our stuff, we didn't have to do any inspection compliance, as long as if you were a woman, you had to be in the home economics club, the extension service, or a kid like me, 4-H. And so we hand milked Guernsey cows into a bucket, and we made butter and buttermilk. And the only thing we couldn't sell was fluid milk, but we could sell everything else. I had a big garden. I sold tons of produce. I had my chickens. I sold eggs. I butchered the culled laying hens, sold those as pre-cooked. I'd pre-cook them and pick the meat off, put it in quart containers and sell it as pre-cooked casserole-ready chicken. Sold like hotcakes. We actually butchered steers in the meadow. We'd put them down. A neighbor would come over, field skin them, pull them up in the shed, let them cool out, cut them out, and sold fresh steaks, fresh ground beef, pork, and this was, by 1975, I was a senior, and we were right. Just think about 1975. We're Vietnam War. We're the hippie revolution. The Mother Earth News. John Shuttleworth has started that now for 4 or 5 years, and we're just on the cusp of this revolution where people start wondering whether TV dinners are good for you or not. And I went off to college. We shut down the whole stand because Dad couldn't do it. Nobody else in the family wanted to do it. We shut it down, and by the time I came back from college, the curb market was gone. The 2 ladies quit, and that whole thing was gone. And so the point of all this is that we realized very early on that our economic ticket was the retail dollar. We had, as a small farm, we could not sell the volume at low margins. We had to sell a lower volume at higher margins. We had to become the notorious middleman, the marketer, the distributor, the processor. We had to wear those middleman hats so that we could employ ourselves on fewer pounds, widgets, numbers, whatever. And so that was our shtick from early on. And so when I came, so as soon as I came back from college and we started, I started marketing. Dad was not a marketer. Dad was behind the scenes, quiet. He's genius. The older I get, the more genius he was. But he was not a schmoozer marketer. And I was. I got that from Mom. Mom is our theatrical dramatist, storyteller, whatever. So I got her gift of gab, and I was able to then tell the story, and I quickly, I sold halves of beef, to guys at the newspaper, at work, and people I'd, run into. And I started this direct marketing even before I came back to the farm full time. We were starting to sell, 3 or 4 beeves a year. I'm trying to think. I didn't have eggs. I'd shut down the eggs. We didn't have eggs at that time, but we were certainly selling some beef, and we'd sell a side of pork along. But that was about it. And everything else just sold at the stockyard as commodity. But we knew that direct marketing was where we had to go. Our goal was not selling anything wholesale at commodity. And it took us several years actually to get to that point. But that we knew very early on that's where we needed to go.
If you think about back then when you're direct marketing, the food scene is different than it was different than it is today. What were the points that resonated with customers then? And do any of those stick through till today?
Oh, yes. Freshness, it's fresher. The taste is better. We didn't have this was still early on in the factory farming game. So that phrase did not really exist yet, factory farming or concentrated animal feeding operation. Those kind of things didn't exist yet. But people were, there was actually at that time a lot of personal memory or relationship with homegrown food, and people knew the difference, and so it was. So the things that resonated were fresh, homegrown, backyard. I mean, it was this non-supermarket thing, but the nutritional animal welfare, factory farming, environmental degradation, none of that was in the discussion at that time. It was all just, it's fresh, it tastes better, I like it.
So knowing that there's demand for that out there, there's this nostalgia around it, and you know it, and you're now starting to scale this operation, direct market, you're seeing the cash flow come in. If you look at the livestock that you have now, cattle, beef, poultry, what was the first one that you really focused on to push it to scale beyond just a small, manageable herd to something that could be potentially much bigger, closer to where you are today?
Well, I would say the big step was the pastured broiler. And that came serendipitously. Dad actually had an Amish Mennonite accounting client, elderly couple, that raised these chickens, and they didn't process them. They just sold them live. People would come and put them in a gunny sack or chicken crate or whatever, and they were just trying to get, and they would raise, a couple hundred a year, and they would sell, they'd maybe raise 300, they'd sell 200, and they'd keep 100 for themselves. They were just trying to get their own chickens for free. And they got older and wanted to quit, and they looked around their community, and nobody would take it over. And they had these, 15 customers or so, and they didn't want to leave them in the lurch. These customers really appreciated the chickens. And so, Dad was in discussion with them one year. Of course, I had chickens since I was 10 years old. That's how that was my business. It was eggs, not meat birds. But I butchered, dressed chickens all through my, teen years. So, I certainly, knew chickens. And, Dad came home and that year, I was looking around for something else to do. I wasn't fully employed and had some time on my hands. He said, hey, there's these 15 customers here. You want to raise these chickens for them? Well, sure. That sounds good. So that's what we did. We raised the chickens for these customers, and turned out that most of them didn't stay with us more than a year because we weren't willing to sell them for 50 cents a pound. But because I had processing equipment, we could process them for the customers. Well, that more than compensated for those first folks who were just wanting them cheap. Suddenly a whole new group of people came because now this is fresh chicken processed for me. Obviously there were a lot more customers who would come and get them processed than come and get them live and go home and process them. And so we did those first, whatever, I think we did 400 the first year, and then the second year we did 800, and we realized we had to get better processing equipment, so we actually rented a local poultry processing room down at the co-op. They had a room there, and we rented that and did them down there, and that worked real well. And then the next year we said, well, we need to be able to do it as efficiently as we did it down there, but do it at home. So we had actually purchased at an auction, we purchased a bandsaw and a big Hobart meat grinder from an old A&P that went out of business, with the idea that we would do a butcher shop here. That was the trajectory. Let's become the middleman. Let's do the whole thing and do it all here. Well, when we realized how fast and cheap our local beef butcher could do it compared to us, and then we saw how we could compete with the chickens, we decided, well, shoot, let's sell the beef, the bandsaw and the meat grinder, and let's take that money and buy an automatic feather picker, and we'll make a scalder, and we'll go into the chickens, because we can compete there. We can't compete with the skill set and the heavy, just, a beef carcass is 500-600 pounds. You can't just fling that over your shoulder. You need overhead pulleys. You need height. It's a big deal. And so that's what we did. And so the third year, I think we dropped back maybe to 600 birds, something like that. We did it all at home. Customers were very, very pleased. Now we're in like 1980, whatever, 85, 86. And we realized then that the chicken thing, man, we were onto something then. And because the chickens became a gateway product from a marketing standpoint. A whole chicken was not that expensive. It was easy to get in. Whereas, if you're going to buy a quarter of beef, that's a great big amount of money down. You got to have storage room, blah, blah, blah. But with the chickens, it's an easy in. And so as the chicken customers built, I want beef too. Well, then the beef sales, then suddenly the chickens enabled us to quit selling any of the beef at the sale barn, because now the chicken customers some of them wanted beef as well. And so there was a dramatic symbiosis between those two things. And so now Dad died in 88, but by 86, 87, he was still, doing accounting for a handful of clients, and he would just say, of course, I never knew who his clients were. He never told me where he was going. He was confidentiality up the wazoo, but he did a lot of farm accounts, and he would just tell me, he would say, from what I see, financially, we are more sound than any farm that I'm doing work for. Now, they might drive big fancy trucks. They might have big blue silos. They might have big John Deere tractors. And they might have a pretty white fence out in front of their house and all the amenities that you think about with successful farming. But he said, I can tell you financially, we are more stable, we are more strong than any of them that I've seen. And so he knew, and I still, my biggest, one of my biggest, it's a bummer that he's not around to see, what developed. But he knew where it was going. He knew what was going to happen and the trajectory. And sure enough, by 88, he died in February of 1988. By the fall of 88, early 89, things were really, so this was, the Peter Drucker, 3 to 7 year, business cycle where you enter and then it gets worse, then it gets better. That's exactly where it was for us. And for us, it was about 5 years. At about the 4-year mark, Teresa and I looked at each other and said, you know what? This is going to work. This is going to work. And we still took a couple odd jobs. I helped a guy plant trees. I built some fence for a guy, up until 87, 88. But about 88, 89, and by that time, we were starting to hear the word organic. We were starting to, to see some movement in the marketplace where, the La Leche League and all of that whole, natural health food stores, and that nutritional component was starting to come in, and things were definitely starting to change by the late 80s compared to, the late 70s.
How did the management of that pastured poultry evolve, and where did the impetus for the chicken tractor that you use today come from?
Well, when I was about 6, and I don't remember how old I was just a little kid. We'd been here a couple of years, and Dad said, I've heard about this guy, and I want to go visit him. And I remember very well on a Sunday afternoon, we all got in the car, and we drove somewhere. I have no idea where, but we went to see this guy, this farmer, and he had portable shelters out in the field, and I don't know what was in them. I don't know if it was chickens or pigs or what it was, but they were portable shelters, and Dad came back like he'd been converted. He totally, the epiphany was portable infrastructure, and he totally bought in to the portable infrastructure idea. So a couple of years late, so he quickly, we were milking these cows, and one of the first, big, income opportunity things that he thought about, well, first, in the first couple of years, he thought we could sell pulpwood. And so, we didn't have a big tractor or anything. So he actually took a dump truck, elongated the chassis, put a flatbed on it that would tilt. It had a dump bed on it, so a dump truck, and got a Bombardier Bay winch from an old World War II bomber plane, mounted it up front with a cable on it, and built a pipe pallet. At that time, they didn't. Now all these pulp companies take long lengths. You see these trucks going out, they got these long lengths on them. Back then, everything was 6 feet. So you loaded your wood in 6-foot pallets, you put them on the truck, and then you'd go down to the pulp yard and they'd take them off. And so his idea was he would make, instead of having stanchions that you would load with a knuckle boom loader, make a pulpwood rack that had tires on it. You could push it up on the truck and pull the tires off, stick it in another one, and you could put these on like dominoes. And with our little 20 horsepower tractor and that winch, you could just winch these up on there, tilt the bed back, winch these up on there. And anyway, it was very slick, but in one load he realized there wasn't any money in pulpwood. So they said, well, let's do veal. So we had these cows, he had these milk cows, so he built a portable veal barn with 4 quadrants in it. We could raise 8 calves. We had 4 cows, and the cows would nurse. The calves would jump out, nurse the cows, go back into the thing, and we'd pull it around. The cows would shade up around it. We used electric fence to control things, and it worked beautifully. But his schedule was not routine enough, and we kids were not big enough to do all that work, handle the cows and all that. And so, if you know anything about veal calves, you know little animals like this, whether it's chicks, calves, lambs, I don't care what, they need a routine. You can't raise a baby animal and feed it at 4 o'clock one day, 8 o'clock the next day, 3 o'clock the next day, and 10 o'clock the next day. Well, with his work schedule the way it was very crazy schedule, and so the veal calves did not do real well because of this lack of routine. So we gave that up. But he got this portable thing. About that time, my older brother, 3 years older than me, he decided, I'm going to raise rabbits. And so Dad said, well, let's make a portable rabbit shelter. So we built a pen that had 4 quadrants in it, and it had the hutches in there on a mesh floor, and then it was 8 feet long, and so Dad made 12-foot by 8-foot light pins, chicken wire mesh pins, with a partition up the middle at 4 feet that were like wings off of this portable rabbit hutch thing. And so every weekend when he was home on Saturdays, all of us would go out, the rabbits would go in the hutch, we'd close the doors, and we would pick up the rabbit hutch with the 4 does and their bunnies in it and move it, 8 feet forward, and then we would move the wing forward and set it back up against it, and move the other wing forward, set it back up against it. So each of these rabbits had a 4-foot by 12-foot run. Well, the problem was we couldn't keep them in. The rabbits would dig out. We did everything. We put finishing nails on the bottom. We put fringes of poultry netting, that stuck in. We did all sorts of things. Couldn't keep them in. And I could, my brother and I spent hours, catching rabbits and waiting around a corner with a box propped up with a carrot under, to catch the rabbit. And so we finally abandoned it. And, but of course, Dad never wanting to tear anything apart, said, well, we've got these things, well, we'll just pull them up in the rafters of the shed, and if we ever want to use them for something else, they'll be there. So, by this time, I was 10 years old. I had my first chickens, had a regular, chicken house, chicken yard, turned dirt, a regular clay, dirt chicken yard, and things were going good, and I wanted to expand, and well, what am I going to expand to? And Dad said, hey, we got those old rabbit runs up in the rafters. Why don't we put the chickens in there? We don't have to build another chicken house. We'll just put them in there. We'll put a little bit of roofing on it and put them in there. And that's exactly what we did. And pastured poultry was born.
Yeah, really, really interesting. Thinking of that and hearing your dad's iterations of businesses, going from pulpwood to veal to trying rabbits, he's continually trying things. You started out on your farm with the more or less wing it approach. For people today who want to start, there's a ton of resources out there. You've provided a lot of them. Do you think somebody should start with a plan? We're going to do pastured poultry. Here's what it's going to look like. Here's what the numbers pencil out to be. Execute? Or do you think they need to go in and feel their way through it a little bit and massage it along like you guys did?
You can't Google experience. No matter how hard you try, you can't Google experience. And, we've all read the Malcolm Gladwell stuff about, 10,000 hours in 10 years, or maybe it's not Malcolm Gladwell, maybe it's Seth Godin. But anyway, these business gurus. And so, I'm a big believer in hobby turned to business. I think that too often people read about a person like me, and they want to be where we are, but they want to do it in a quarter of the time. And yes, we know a lot more now. There is a lot more information available, and the market has certainly changed. So there's no question in my mind. But what if you had to do over again? We could do what we have done in less time. There's no doubt in my mind. If we knew then what we know now. But there is an experiential element to this that you cannot shortcut. And you can't burn rubber at the start. And so I'm a big believer in dabbling. I think that if you want to do something, you should dabble. Don't jeopardize the family. Don't jeopardize your livelihood, whatever. There are a lot of things that you can do dabbling, and this is coming now full circle back to our whole discussion of time management and discipline. You don't have to go on a Caribbean cruise. You don't have to go to Las Vegas. You don't have to see the latest show, the latest opera, or the latest NFL football game. There are when you add up the available hours in a day, if you really want to do something, you will eat, sleep, drink, this, whatever it is. And one of the famous quotes from Michael Jordan's biography is that every basket that he scored in a basketball game, he had to miss 1,000 shots in practice in order to make that one basket. That's a powerful statement, and it's profound. People, and I really appreciate you going back to these early days, letting me kind of put some of this on the table, because people see where things are, and they don't know. What Bill Gates slept in a basement and ate Roman noodles for 10 years and worked 100 hours a week, and he says, I wouldn't recommend that to anybody. And I'm not saying, Bill Gates is the measure of success. All I'm saying is that measure anybody who's been successful, and you will go back. If you go back far enough, somewhere you will find what I affectionately call the slog. The slog. It's just the slog of staying with it, don't quit. I always tell people, they say, what's the secret to your success? I says, we're not smarter than anybody else. We just didn't quit. We just outlasted. And we have seen in our experience, I'll tell you a story. The first chicken picker I bought, so I had these chickens, of course, they were getting old. I was, 12 years old, something like that. So I got to butcher chickens. I can't just hand pluck these things all the time. So I gotta do something. So we put an ad in the Rural Electric Co-op magazine, Plucker one. We didn't know the name. We didn't know it was called a picker. All we knew was plucking. So put an ad in there. I got 2 hits. And so in our 1963 Chrysler Newport with our homemade trailer built off a Model T chassis, towing behind at whatever I was 13 years old or so, we embarked on this day's journey of going out to see these 2 responses to this classified ad that I'd put in the Rural Electric Co-op. Went and visited one guy, saw his thing, went to visit another guy, and bought his for $75. I bought his whole picker, scalder, table, the whole deal. Brought it back, and started dressing these chickens. And when we then, fast forward now 10 years, now we're doing the pastured broiler, and we upgraded. I told you, we had to dress them with the kind of equipment we'd use at the local slaughterhouse, but do it here at the farm. We traded in that butchering equipment for beef, and we got an automatic feather picker. Well, that meant that this little one at a time by hand, 1945 model, probably maybe one of the first pickers ever made, I don't know, became, excess for us. And, so then there, as I started getting a little bit of, local fame and notoriety for this, pastured poultry thing there in the late 80s, people would come by and, it's pretty good. And so for about 10 years there, people in the area, like, within 10 miles of us, would come and interested. I said, well, here, start. And we would give this extra feather picker to these folks and say, here, take it, start, and all we ask is if you ever quit, bring it back. Well, they thought that was the best gift you could imagine, and so they'd start. Invariably, every single one of them, 2 years, you could measure on a calendar, 2 years, they came back with the picker. This is way too much work. And guess what? By that time, they had 20 customers who were now addicted to pastured chickens. You mind taking our customers? No. We practically built our early business by giving that picker to people in the area that wanted to duplicate what we were doing. They'd last 10 years, come back with a 10, and then we'd pick up their 20 customers. That was the best advertisement, marketing scheme we ever had. We've never had anything marketed better than that. So, when I say that the slog, it means that you don't have stars in your eyes. I mean, it's good to have vision and it's good to have, desire out there, but realize a lot of it is just, I get up every day and I go do my stuff, and it's not always nice weather. Sometimes I come in frozen to the bone. Sometimes I'm soaked. Sometimes I'm sweating down to my kneecaps. But you slog. You stay with it. And it's in the repetition. It's in that slog repetition that you develop mastery. And if there's one thing that defines success, it is mastery. And mastery requires you to do whatever it is that you do in every kind of nuance you can imagine. I can show anybody how to gut a chicken in about 20 minutes. But you will not become a master until you've done old chickens, young chickens, big chickens, little chickens, chickens on a hot day, chickens on a cold day, chickens that you forgot to take the feet away fast enough. All right, I can go on and on, but you see what I'm saying is all these nuances, and it is in the nuance. It is knowing how to handle and adjust to every nuance with skill that moves you to mastery. And mastery simply takes repetition, persistence, staying with it.
The bell curve says very few people get to mastery. And I think the experience of a lot of people who start businesses is what you said the people who return the plucker would say. Too much work. You provide a lot of educational material for people. You see interns come through. I talk to people via the podcast who want to do this. It's great to say that anybody can do this. But do you think some part of this is just some people are the genetically pre-programmed to be hard, like they don't quit. They do have the grit. They go out day after day. I've talked to a lot of your former interns that say you put them to shame baling hay. Some of that can be learned, but some of that is just who you are. What are your thoughts on that? And with all the people you've dealt with who wanted to get into farming, can anybody do this really? Or is it just a select group of people like the Michael Jordans of the world who go on to dominate a space?
I do think that anybody can do it. I really do. And I think what separates the ones who are successful from the ones who aren't, is not information. It's not knowledge, a lot of it is simply what we call it, get her done. You can talk about it, yak about it. I mean, sometimes I see people who are scared of creativity. Our technician culture, I think, facilitates this fear of just winging it, because when you sit down at your computer, there's a sequence of things, of buttons that you have to push to make that computer do stuff, and it's the same sequence every single time. The computer does not like you to be creative and say, well, I know that hitting Command Q does this, but I think I'm going to hit Command P this time. Well, why doesn't it work? See, as we have moved to a more and more technically sophisticated context, I think that it has actually reduced our ability to, as you say, just wing it, because things are so standard. They're very regimented in order, in sequence, and I think what that does subconsciously is it makes us more and more fearful of going into the unknown, and being creative. And so we see a lot of people, we call it, paralysis by analysis, where they make spreadsheets after spreadsheets after spreadsheets, talk about it, yak about it. At the end of the day, you got to go out and water the chickens. You've got to gather the eggs. I mean, you can spreadsheet it all day, but you just got to go out and get it done. And so I think there's definitely a balance. I mean, you want to plan. We do time and motion studies. We actually, time ourselves, and we have benchmarks for things. And I watch people if you're at all familiar with my stuff with pastured poultry, the number one reason that pastured poultry fails is people make their structures too heavy. They come at it from a dog or a cow or a sheep or a goat, mentality, and so they're using 2x4s and heavy lumber, and the first thing you know, the structure is 600 pounds and it's way too heavy to move, and the whole thing breaks down, doesn't work because everything's too heavy. This is chicken. We're talking about 1.5 by 3/4 inch material, light material. The lighter it is, the easier it is to move. And so our benchmark, for example, for moving chicken shelters is 60 seconds per shelter. So one person can move 5,000 birds in 60 minutes without ever starting an engine. Now that's our benchmark. There might be somebody that hits that. If there is, I don't know anybody in the country that has hit that benchmark. And yet that is a very public benchmark. It's one we expect all of our interns to hit. It's a very, very doable benchmark. Why don't people hit it? Well, I just talked to a guy not long ago. He went to his place. He's doing this, and I said, "Where's your dolly?" He said, "Well, two people move our shelters." Well, it's very awkward. It's ergonomically awkward it's ergonomically easy to pick up the shelter and move backwards because you're leaning against the way of movement. But to pick it up and move forward, you're trying to stick your toes under the shelter. It's just awkward. It's ridiculous. And he said, "Well, we just didn't want to build the dolly." Because the dolly it's the whole secret of the whole deal, And so I don't know. It's almost like people are masochists, Let's see if we can make this fail. I always tell people, look, I feel like this with some of Bill Mollison's stuff. You read the Designer's Guide, which is the Bible, still the Bible of permaculture. You read some of this stuff, and it's so to me, it makes such intuitive sense. And so when I go out, I'm looking at his diagram or whatever, and I don't try to reinvent the wheel. Just do it like the picture says.
Well, here's a thought on that. So where do you think the line is drawn between mimicking and being creative? People will look at your shelters and they may use them, and for some reason it might not work in their context. Maybe it's too hot where they're at, or whatever reason they say it doesn't work. At what point do you do the carbon copy, and when do you take the carbon copy and start to say, okay, I need to express that creativity and go? Because I think there's a danger in just following the recipe, and there's a danger in just winging it when there's a lot of knowns and information.
Right. Oh, I couldn't agree more. Yes. Okay. So my first thing is do the carbon copy first. Look, if somebody has done something that's been successful, do a carbon copy first. And once you have done the carbon copy, then make whatever changes and adjustments you want to make. What I see is nobody is patient enough to make a carbon copy. They got to tweak this. And they have no clue. They have no clue that what we have created, we have spent 50 years perfecting. There's a reason why every single board is where it is, why every single wire, why we use aluminum and not steel, why we don't use billboard fabric, why we don't use tarps, why we have an interchangeable back end. Several years ago, we created a protocol, a moving a chicken shelter protocol sheet, an SOP, standard operating procedure. Do you know it's 5 pages long? 5 pages long for moving a chicken shelter. Now, to the average person, how in the world? But there's everything you can imagine. Okay, and so the temptation here's the single biggest thing that I see. People come to this. They've got a college degree. They've been earning $90,000 at their whatever IT job, and they're gonna do the Green Acres thing and come and be a farmer, and they don't believe that it could possibly be intellectually challenging. It's farming. Dummies farm, right? D students farm. Who are the farmers in the comics? John Arbuckle grew up on a farm. He's the dumbest dope in the world. And Zero in Beetle Bailey, he's the farm boy. You go any place, pick your farm, and they're the dumbest guys on the block, right? And so the mentality and the culture is that any dummy can farm. And so people come, hyped up on their own academic prowess and their own hubris, and they don't realize that there is this whole encyclopedic wealth of nuance to being successful with this. And so what happens is you think you're smarter than you should, than you are. And then the next thing you know, so you're trying to second guess. Well, I bet I could improve on that and improve on that. So our rule, we have an apprentice handbook, and one of the rules in the apprentice handbook is do it our way first, and when you have hit our benchmarks with our SOPs and protocols, then come with your suggestions. Don't come to me with any suggestion until you've done it our way to our benchmarks first.
Let's say somebody has the patience to do that. They follow the carbon copy, they're putting it into place, and they're noticing different results. They're not hitting the benchmark. They're going through, not seeing why. How would you advise somebody to start to troubleshoot something like that or remove bottlenecks? You could just scrap the whole thing and start over, and now you're dealing with a whole nother animal. How do you compartmentalize this troubleshooting process to gradually tackle this change, which I think is probably the more effective way to go at tweaking a problem?
Yeah. Well, I think, the quick and short answer is come visit us. Look, if you want to do what somebody else is doing, go visit them. Go see them. We have a completely open door policy here. And it's amazing how easy some of the things can be. For example, I was in Petaluma, California, on a pretty significant sized pasture poultry operation. They were struggling. It's just too much, too hard, blah, blah, blah. Well, they're around Petaluma, California. There's a lot of pretty steep hills. And this ranch was no different. They had some pretty steep hills. And, of course, the homestead was down in the bottom of the valley, like a lot of them are, the farmsteads there. And, so that's where the brooder was. That's where everything was, the infrastructure was. And so they were starting the shelters near the brooder and pulling them up the hill. And I looked at this thing for like 60 seconds and I said, well, why don't you've got to put the chicks in a crate anyway to take them out to the shelters. Why don't you start with the shelters at the top of the hill, spend the extra 60 seconds driving up there with your chicks, put them in at the top of the hill so you move the shelters down the hill. Well, never thought of it before, and it is true that we do get in our ruts. And so, goodness, having the humility to have different eyes, that's why pasture walks are so valuable. Goodness, 4 years ago we made a major change here based on one of the interns pointed out. He said, the chickens move easier going east toward into the sun than they do going west. Our shelters, we can move them either way, east or west. And I knew they moved a little easier east, but so anyway, we half a year we moved them east, half a year we moved them west because of the two different fields, and we take them over to the other field, and he said, well, once they're already on the wagon, just driving all the way to the end, so you always move them east, it's not that big a deal. And so we said, well, we'll try it. Well, sure enough, it speeded everything up. It was simpler. The chickens moved a lot better. It was the cat's meow. So now, so that was 4 years ago, we made that official change. We never move a shelter west. We always move them east. So that was just 4 years ago. That's 40 years into this, and we still made a change. And so everything can be refined. Everything can be tweaked. Sometimes we are so close to it, we can't see what needs to be changed. And that's why we need to go visit people, and we need to not go to Las Vegas and not go to Hollywood and not have Netflix. And we need to take that time. If we want to do this and be successful, we take that time and we go visit and talk and hobnob with people that will encourage us to better performance.
If you think about getting out there, talking, visiting with people, and sticking with this need to be creative part of farming that you're going to have, one thing I know people are absolutely scared of when it comes to selling farm product is just that. It's selling product, marketing product. If you think about when you were coming up in the 80s and you were saying you were making a local name for yourself, that was that pastured poultry guy. That was pre-functional internet. There was no online. What were you doing back then to outbound market your product, to build local excitement for it? Because I see what you had to do back then. It was constrained because you didn't have all the social and online options you have now. How did you tackle that, and what worked? Because I think a lot of that will translate through to today.
Sure. Sure. Well, we kind of had a three-pronged approach. The first thing was that we realized we needed to educate. The key was getting the consumer educated that there really was a difference. And so I put together, on my Kodak carousel, remember those slide projectors, a program, and I put it out there for social clubs, Kiwanis, Ruritan, Rotary, Toastmasters, AARP, Key Clubs, Exchange Clubs. I mean, there's all these social clubs in a group. Woodmen of the World, Lions, Moose. Name your all right. And they're looking for interesting programs. They meet, whatever, monthly or whatever. And so I put this together, Saving the Planet with Pastured Livestock, and would go as an educational, informational thing. And I'd always take a couple, newsletters, customer order blanks and stuff. And at the end, it was a very soft sell. Right? If any of you would like to participate in this, if this resonates with you, I happen to have order blanks here today, and you're welcome to sign up. And in a group of, 30 or 40 people, I'd always get 3 or 4. Never a majority, but always a few, and that was a very significant part. But see, that was the social gathering of the day. A lot of those civic clubs now are almost defunct, or they're all, 80 years old. They're barely, functioning anymore, because our social networking is not in those civic clubs. It's in a new place. But you go where people gather. You go where conversations are happening, and educate, inform. You become the expert in this, and we explained the differentiation and gave people a chance to participate in healing. That's a very powerful thing. You can participate in the healing of the planet, healing of your food, healing of yourself. Okay, so that was one. The second one was that we gave samples, and everybody, as you can imagine, when you're marketing, every conversation. Dad used to say every bush is a burning bush. Moses in the burning bush. So to us, every conversation was a burning bush. It's sacred ground. You're with me, and you know what you're eating. And so you have this conversation. And if anybody was interested, we give them a sample. Samples work. Procter and Gamble built shampoo on that basis. So that works. And then the third thing was, when somebody would order something, we still do this to this day. We would do the samples to this day. We do the programs too, but those clubs just don't exist much anymore, so we don't get very many calls for that. But we still give the samples, and today we still do this one where somebody calls and says, "Hey, I got your stuff, at so-and-so's house. I got your stuff last week, I want your chicken," or whatever. Our first question is not, "Oh, good, well, how many do you want?" It is, where did you hear about us? And if we can track that down, then we reward that cheerleader evangelist with, a free product, a free something, and show our appreciation for that. So word of mouth, incentivizing word of mouth. I think it's amazing that companies that spend, $40 million on a 60-second Super Bowl ad still get 80% of their business from word of mouth. So we've really cultivated that word of mouth. It is allegedly the slowest way to grow, but it's also the most loyal way to grow. And so we've incentivized that over the years. We do a loyalty program right now. People that buy a certain amount, you get when you buy $500, you get, $50 a punch, and you get 10 punches, and you get $10 off your next order. The loyalty programs work. And so we still work that.
Out of curiosity, do you still have customers today from when you first started out?
Yeah, we have grandchildren of customers that we had when we started out.
Yeah, so the customer for life, treat them well, get out there, do the outbound marketing, the local thing. Yeah, and it works. Thinking about your new book here, Your Successful Farm Business. If you think about You Can Farm, which was written 20 years ago, the new one, it's out. I read through it. It's a great book. What are some of the big changes that if you had to distill it down, if we just stick with, say, the base principles, not technique stuff, not like build it this way, but discipline, work hard. Is there any of that stuff that's new in this book that you've came upon or really thought more about over the past 20 years?
Yeah, well, I think, that's primarily what this book is about. It's the a lot of the new nuances. There are differences. Like, for example, I think the first chapter is about working landscapes, and that has come about as what I'll call the radical environmental movement has moved more and more to what I call environmentalism by abandonment, and we have almost a militant aggressiveness against cows, for one thing, but against active farmers, and I realize that most farmers are doing damage, but I think this has made people gun shy about working with a landscape, manipulating a landscape in a positive way, which is, of course, one of the reasons I so love permaculture. But that is certainly a contextual and cultural nuance that has changed, in the 20 years. I think the isms. I have another chapter on read eclectically or be eclectic, and I think with the rise of everything from biodynamics to certified organics to even permaculture to holistic management. We now have so many kind of organisms or certification kind of things. And so it's very easy, to kind of, get denominational in your thinking. And so, I think that's changed some too, that the movement has, matured to where you have, denominational nuances. And I think that's a negative. It's not negative. It's just a new reality that you have to work against allowing yourself to become myopic in your particular little niche. So yeah, I think there is a context that's changed. One of the biggest ones, I think, is in the last couple of chapters I start talking about opportunities, and I think the first of all, the ability to lease land is much easier today than it ever was. There's way more abandoned land than there was back 20 years ago. And number two, I think that the aging, the graying of the world, aging of people, as the age ranges has changed, we are seeing more and more and increase of non-infectious diseases, autism and things like that we're seeing a lot more opportunity in farms as part of a healing whatever model, ministry, whatever, and that is, I think that's very, very new. Just from keeping people, elderly to providing a place of service for brain injured, emotionally disadvantaged, juvenile delinquents, veterans. Goodness, look at all of the veteran farm. There's just, seems like every day I get an email from another outfit that wants to start a farm for veterans, a farm for juvenile delinquents, a farm for ex-offenders. And it's wonderful. It's wonderful that our movement has now, when I say our movement, I don't mean the factory farming movement. I mean the integrity farming movement has been able to carve out a space of healing, a haven of an oasis of wellness. You don't go to a Tyson chicken farm to get well. You don't go to a fumigated, pesticide-laden strawberry farm in San Joaquin Valley to get healed. But you do come to a diversified, pastoral, multi-speciated, diversified, local-oriented, soil-building, compost-driven. Those are places of healing and rest. And I'm just delighted that we're seeing this additional opportunity for income come to the agrarian sector.
Yeah, really well said. And you're somebody who's out there being that beacon, pulling a lot of people in. You've led the way. You've put a lot of knowledge out there to help people get started. Thanks for taking the time today, Joel, to chat about your new book, Your Successful Farm Business. Really appreciate it. Thanks again.
Thank you, Diego.
There you have it, Joel Salatin on farming. I hope you liked this episode, and I hope you got a lot out of it. I loved this episode, and I loved having this conversation with Joel. There was a ton of takeaways, a ton of sound bites that came out of here, but the one that really sticks with me is this whole idea of you can't Google experience. You just have to get out there and try it. If you want to learn more from Joel, be sure to check out Joel's new book, Your Successful Farm Business. I've read it and it's excellent. I'm not just saying that. This is a must read for anybody looking to get into the farm space, or even if you are in the farm space and you want to learn something from one of the masters, check out Joel's book. If you want to learn more from what Darby and I do, be sure to check out our new website at grassfedlife.co. That's the new home for the podcast. That's the new home for the blog. We're starting to put more blog articles up there. And that's the site where you can start to find out more about the Farm Business Essentials Workshop. That workshop will be going live shortly, and we'll have a special discount for the early bird registrants. For more information specifically on that workshop, visit farmbusinessessentials.com. That's all for this one. Thanks for listening. Stay tuned next Monday for another episode of Grass-Fed Life, where it's all about raising cows, pigs, and chickens profitably on pasture.